How's everyone doing today? I'm johtojonny, and today I am joined by Dusty Gogoat, where we're going to be discussing the regions of Pokemon mainline games. Everyone give a warm welcome to Dusty.
What's up, everyone? It's Dusty Gogoat.
So let's go ahead and start with Kanto, because that's the one that everyone likes to talk about the most, and it's the easiest one for us to get into. When it comes to Kanto, what are your favorite things about it, and how do you think the region is versus how much you particularly like it?
I think most of the appeal of Kanto really does come down to those early routes and nostalgia. I think for a lot of things, when you compare Kanto to most other regions and how expressive and animated, colorful they are in the later half of the generations, right? I think Kanto really does not look that special outside of its nostalgia factor. I think there's been some nice highlights, some updates that have happened through games like Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee and Fire Red Leaf Green. I think there's been some updates, but in truth, I don't know. I mean, we'll have to see today. I don't know how excited I am about the Kanto region.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. So I think that the region on its layout is relatively decent. It's not my personal favorite, and I don't think it does anything particularly special. I would say that Kanto is pretty average, maybe on the less exciting side of Pokemon regions. What do you think? Do you agree with that?
I mean, I don't really know if this is to the region, but I did always appreciate how you can in some way play this game a little out of order with the badges. Mm-hmm. And part of that is not too many limitations on traversing the region, but also some of that is I don't know. Actually, there's no other point to that. That's just that first one. But so some highlights for me, I think, are because there are some really cool places, locations in Kanto. I like that first route. What is it? Viridian Forest. That is like iconic for me. Mm-hmm. Just scenes of the anime, but also just like it's like the first dungeon, right? It's the first dungeon in any Pokemon game. Mount Moon has always had a lot of. I've always liked that, and they spruced it up a little bit in HeartGold and SoulSilver. I guess actually just in Gold and Silver. There's a little cutscene that you get certain nights of the week at midnight. Little Clefairy will come out and dance if you capture them.
Was that not in the originals? That wasn't
not in the originals. That comes out in Gold and Silver and Crystal.
Oh wow! I could have sworn that was also in Yellow. Am I wrong about that one?
I don't think it's in Yellow. I don't think it's in Yellow. But
it's been a while since I played the Game Boy version.
Yeah.
So.
And what are some other really cool locations? See, the thing is like, even though there are some cool locations in Kanto, they're done way better in other regions. So like when we think about a what do you call it? Like a power plant, it's done better, I think, in Hoenn even, which is only 2 generations later. Mm-hmm. And there's plenty of other dungeons that have like a specific type of Pokemon in it. I think the Cerulean, what is it? Not the Whirl Islands. Where do you get Articuno in Kanto?
Articuno is in the like fudge, like Fuji Fuchsia.
It's those islands, right? That's out of
Seafoam Islands.
Seafoam Islands, yeah, exactly.
I was thinking Mount Fuji for some reason.
Yeah, and I think Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee do like a little bit better with that. But truthfully, it's like there's so many other ice dungeons. Even just in the very next generation in Gold and Silver, the ice cave, or what was it called? It's called just the ice cavern, ice cave.
Something like that.
That's way better. There's literally ice puzzles
with better puzzles, yeah.
So and Hoenn does it even better. So I feel like it's outclassed by a lot of other gens.
Yeah.
A lot of other regions.
So when it comes to Kanto, I'm gonna show everyone here actually right now. This is what the tier list looks like, and as you can see, we're gonna go S through D. We're going to make B true neutral and go up and down from there, with S being the absolute best and our favorites, to D being something that's none of our favorites and also just objectively bad. When it comes to Kanto, we have several different games that are represented. So Dusty, let's go ahead and say that right now we are talking about the original Game Boy trilogy, blue, green, red, yellow. I know that's 4 games, but you know what I mean? Because the Japanese and the English version. So when it comes to just that base original Kanto, we're gonna go ahead and just discuss that right now, and we'll get into the other ones when we get to those generations. So with this, do we agree that because Kanto feels pretty outclassed by regions to come later, that it would probably be a C tier, just a little below true neutral?
I think those first 4 games in comparison, yeah, it's just yeah.
All right.
Unfortunately,
we're in agreement. Yeah, we're in agreement then. All right. So then, as you can see now, I'm gonna go ahead and put the original trilogy, which is not a trilogy if you take into account the fact that there's a Japanese and English version.
I guess there's 5 games because there's Japanese blue version.
Oh, there is? Wait, is there really? Wow.
There's a Japanese blue version, but I think it's actually. No, there's no Japanese blue version. It's Japanese red version. Anyways.
That's kind of confusing. But you know what? Not going to even complain. So now we're going to go ahead and head on to Gen 2, which means we're going to be talking about Gold, Silver, Crystal. And with Gold, Silver, Crystal, we get to the Johto region and a revamped version of Kanto. So I want us to... Let's talk about, I guess it would have to be both of those together.
That's kind of how I see it. I mean, if we're basing it just on the Johto region, it's weird. A lot of people give Johto flack because they consider it just like, it's like you can only judge just Johto. You can't consider both regions, but I feel like it was designed to include both regions.
Yeah, especially since they changed things about a Kanto with a 3-year difference, so maybe we can count them as both, but let's also kind of acknowledge the fact that Johto is also its own region separately.
It is.
So like talking about Johto without Kanto for a moment, I think that for me it's my favorite. It's my all-time favorite region out of the mainline games personally. But I also might have a lot of bias because my first game was Pokemon Crystal. So
what is your gamer tag again? JotoJohnny?
JotoJohnny, yeah. So it actually is a very true to the name. It's my favorite region. But I think I can also acknowledge that Johto on its own, without Kanto being included, isn't the best, but I would say that it did a lot of things better than Kanto at the very least, and then it also ends up including Kanto in the long run anyway. So with Johto, it had better dungeons in my opinion because it had more puzzles to them. So like you talked about the ice cave, you know. And there's
even as early as like the Slowpoke well, like that's already a way more interesting dungeon.
And there's a dungeon before that too that you go through. It's a cave. And there's spots you can't go into until later in the game when you get Surf. And then Johto also uses days of the week to spruce up those places too. So like you can find a Lapras on I think Fridays in that cave, things like that.
That's correct.
That like make them even more interesting as well. So there's a lot better things that they did with the dungeons. When it comes to the overall region, it's pretty one note. It's very just here's like a grassy town, here's another grassy town, and they have like 2 beach towns, but they're still pretty close to just grassy towns, at the same time, like Olivine and Cianwood. But what are your thoughts? I want to get your thoughts on Johto since it's not your favorite, or I'm assuming it's not your favorite like it is mine.
Yeah, no, I think Johto is probably, if I had to like give you just a first response, Johto would also be my favorite region. We can get into later some other regions that are close to my heart, but I think this is something I was thinking about in preparation for Sinnoh. I think the first 4 generations are really plagued by that. Maybe the limitations of like the systems that they were originally on, where you really get, like you said, all of these, like every town feels like a grassy town. A grassy town, this one has trees, this one doesn't have trees.
And flowers. One has flowers.
This one has flowers. This one has buildings. I think Johto gets a little bit away from that. I think, or maybe it's not so, maybe it stands out a little bit more. I think the mystic of Pokemon Legends Arceus with that old-fashioned aesthetic, I feel like that kind of bleeds through in Johto. We get a little bit of that, but like it kind of clashes with the flair of the 2000s, right? Like when the games came out, like you have a region that feels like Legends Arceus, like old school Japan, but the main characters have like I don't even know.
They phones. Have like they have phones. Yeah.
Yeah, they have phones, and they have like I don't know, whatever we wore in the year 2000.
Yeah, there's technology too.
Caps.
Yeah, there's technology. So it's cool because it's like very old. It's like having Hisui but with technology in it, which is really cool. You know, they have a high-speed rail. They have boats and like big boats that actually run on like fuel and all that.
Yeah. And what I was thinking about is like, I mean, I don't want to jump ahead, but like if we do want to consider Johto with context of Kanto, I feel like Johto is a complete upgrade of Kanto and complements Kanto very well. Like you're saying, you have the magnet train. All of a sudden, the two regions feel connected, and it feels like, that magnet train. It feels integral to the region, right?
Yeah.
Even the ship in the SS Anne or whatever the ship that the harbor or the port in or wherever Lieutenant Surge is.
I forgot what city that is. I think it's Vermilion, right?
Yeah, Vermilion City. Like that all of a sudden feels a lot. That doesn't feel like I think it's Vermilion.
Or is Vermilion the one that Giovanni was the gym leader? I really don't remember.
No, that's Viridian.
Okay, yeah, so it is Vermilion. Cool.
Yeah, so like what I like about that is like that port serves a purpose at one point in the game in Kanto, but with Johto, all of a sudden that's a new destination. There's like all of a sudden feels like it has an actual purpose in the game.
Although that port does have a point in the remakes, but which we'll talk about later.
Yeah, and the connection, like these games are also tied by their Elite Four, or in the Indigo Plateau. Like it exists. Like they're truly connected regions.
Yeah. So I think the way that we should look at it is like we're looking at it as just Johto for the most part, but also the way that it complements with Kanto because they are connected. So I like that you're talking about, say, Mount Silver and the Indigo League right there.
Yeah.
They are right next to each other and connected, and I think it's very clever how they tied that in with Johto.
Yeah. And the way it's like in the retcon is like, well, there's a mountain range here. That's why you've never seen Johto in Kanto, right?
Yep.
And also like, I think there really are I mean, for me at least, there are super memorable locations that aren't just like grass or water or whatever, right? There are magical, epic spots like the Lake of Rage.
Yeah.
Or like the Sudowoodo encounter. You're deep in the forest and like, it's like, what is this, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, but there's a lot of places like this, and yeah, I think it reaches its fullest potential in Gen 4 with the remakes. But I think this game is gorgeous, and if you play the old game at night, right, there's a full color swap on everything in the game, and it's so cozy.
It looked so magical back in the day. Oh my goodness, I remember it. Yeah, it was very, very pleasant on the eyes when you were younger, and those were like the better graphics for a handheld, you know.
Yeah.
But
I guess so. If we're only
Oh, I was gonna say we should also like acknowledge the fact that the region felt alive in the long run too, because of the phone system and because of the days of the week system, the day and night system, things like that. And I think that all is feeding into why a lot of people hold the Johto region so endearingly. And I think it's perfectly fine to count that towards why we think Johto is as good as it is. Because like these are steps that the developers took to make Johto feel alive and feel as vibrant as it felt.
Johto is like an Animal Crossing game. It's small, it's smaller in scope, but every location has a purpose, right? Every location, every route has an apricorn tree, or it has on every day of the week, there's a new Pokemon you can get. There's a new item you can get from certain trainers. You'll constantly get phone calls to do rebattles. So it's essentially like in the post game, and this is post game before post game was expected. This is post game before online Wi-Fi, right? The post game is literally every time you turn the game on, you have daily tasks.
Yep.
And I think those things do exist I do think those things do exist in current games, but considering that those existed back in 2000. Like I think that's really cool.
I also think that they made it more replayable for after you finish the game. The post game has more for you to constantly, or it's always refreshing things for you to do that make the world feel alive. Unlike, say, Sword and Shield, where the tasks for you to do only have to do with like wild Pokemon out in like the wild area or something like that. You know, there's nowhere else for you to really to go unless you want to do online battling. But in Johto, it's like you go in, and every time you go in, even if you've beaten the game 10 years ago, you can still feel like Joey's still there on the region waiting for you, calling you up on the phone, you know?
It's like going home to see your parents, and you're, you know, all the neighbors are like, oh, how you been? And you're like, good, I gotta keep going though.
And again, like calling back to Animal Crossing, like you go in 10 years later and they're like, well, in this game, they act like nothing ever happened. But in Animal Crossing, they'll make you feel guilty for being on for so long. So there is kind of a difference. But it is interesting.
So if we're only looking at Gen 2, where do you want to place this? Because I don't think it's perfect. I think there's other iterations and there's other games that have better regions. If anything, this is like above neutral.
Yeah, there's so many memorable spots. I was originally going to put it in A, and now I'm debating S. But you don't think it's S? If you don't think it's S, it's going in A.
I don't think Gold, Silver, Crystal is S. I think... I mean, we'll get to it.
All right.
I think because it's like the region that we're thinking of is magical because of the nostalgia and because of the remakes and the other media we've seen.
Yeah.
I think Johto itself in this iteration is kind of limited. I think it looks better than Kanto, but it's not as expressive as the games that come after it. So I would put it at maybe neutral or A.
Totally valid. I'm putting it in A tier, as we can see now.
I won't argue with you.
Yeah. It seems like we're pretty same page on that. It's just and the region was kept alive so well over the years and preserved so well. Yeah. Even with the original games, so that is why they are in A. Which brings us now to Hoenn.
Hoenn was like the Pokemon series is his first soft reboot, right? This was the first game that they released where it was not backwards compatible, and I was too young to really notice that. But I was not too young to witness the national Dex crisis.
Yeah, and it also it separated itself from Gold, Silver, Crystal, and Red, Blue, Yellow, not only because it's on a different hardware, but also because it no longer calls back to Johto and Kanto. And a lot of the Pokemon, if I remember correctly playing this game, a lot of the Pokemon you discover in the wild are mostly new Pokemon until the post game. If I remember correctly, I remember feeling like I didn't see a lot of Pokemon that I knew from the first two generations. Whereas, say, when you're playing Gen 2, a lot of the Pokemon, especially even in the early game, are like Pidgey and a few like Geodude. You would see a lot of Pokemon from Gen 1 and Gen 2, but in Gen 3, I feel like it was mostly just new Pokemon everywhere. We had a bird replacement, we had all this and that replaced like those same archetypes of Pokemon from the first two generations. What do you think?
I totally agree with Hoenn. I remember I have a very distinct memory playing that on my brand new, I might even have it right here, brand new Game Boy Advance SP. And I was playing like Ruby version, and my team was like, everything was brand new. Everything was brand new. There are some Kanto Pokemon you can get, some staples that are in every game. Like, I don't know, like you can get Geodude, you can get Tentacruel, you can get some of those Pokemon, but this region introduced more Pokemon than Johto did and more Pokemon than Sinnoh did. So there was like 131 Pokemon. So I think you're right. But as for the region itself, I mean, because I think there's a lot of redeeming qualities of Hoenn. Hoenn, to me, I think is the game I've replayed the most. I replay stuff on my GameCube on the big screen. I did that in college and high school. So I think I've replayed Hoenn a ton. But Tamahiro does a great job. There's a video somewhere online where she totally changed my mind on Hoenn and made me realize how like magical it is, because apparently like the land versus nature or land versus sea was based on some real life politics in Japan at the time. I couldn't tell you
they
all
brought
about
that
it
story
right now.
into the game. If you play either one of the versions, it changes who's side is on your side, like the land side or the sea side, versus the villain being the other one. And then in Emerald, I think they're both villains or something like that, and they fight each other, and you have to like stop it, whatever. But I find that very interesting that they like introduce the politics as a main part of how the games are structured, which is really cool.
And it's like local politics. But for me, I'm like, because of that, I mean because of that, I just see Hoenn as this like giant metaphor, and it's just there. This is the region where I'm like, Pokemon feels like magic, right? Mm-hmm. The region is actually magical. There's volcanoes, there's deep sea caverns, there's sunken ships, there's deep forests, there's a whole route that is just littered with volcano dust and ash. There's a city in a white crater that you can only access through an undersea passage. There's a city that's just floating on logs. There's a city made of tree forests. To me, this is an S tier region.
Okay, so I was actually going to say it. I'm going to go ahead and say it now because you basically just segued it into it anyway. I think Hoenn is probably the best region out of all of Pokemon. Okay. So
I also disagree with me for a second.
No, I objectively think that Hoenn is the best region out of all of the Pokemon games. It's not one of my favorites, but I have to just like look at it and say like there's so many things about this region that make it so awesome. Not only do you have this divide of the land, which is very creatively designed in my opinion. You know, you have the volcanic area you mentioned earlier, with like the effects on the screen of like when I remember the ash like falling on the screen looked really cool. And so you had weather effects for I think the first time like visually. Maybe there was like rain in the previous games, but this one had more than just rain, you know?
This was the first time it was in the overworld.
Yep. And not only do you have that like well-designed land portion with lots of creative things like a forest town and things like that, but you have this mysterious ocean that you get to explore not only from above but below. You can dive underwater, and I think that Hoenn also has some of the best dungeons, and one of the dungeons I feel like is the underwater, just like being able to go underwater from different parts of the ocean, and that's really, really cool to me.
That's not something that they've really brought back since I think Gen 5 or maybe the remakes, but never to the same extent.
Did you go underwater in Gen 5?
But there's no Pokemon. It's just like for one single area. It's not for traversal. It's really just like a destination.
It's a destination. Okay. I think I know what you're talking about. But
dude, you're really describing it excellently. Like, Hoenn is just, and you know, we were saying like the first 4 generations were limited based on the hardware, but I really think actually Hoenn totally gets away with that. Hoenn, every route, even though everything's on the Game Boy Advance, every route looks like a new route, a new experience, a new location. And I hate to say it, but Gen 4 actually goes back to that. Goes back to what it was in Kanto, where everything looks just the same and mundane. So, bro, I didn't realize this going into it, but Hoenn is S tier.
Yeah, I think Hoenn is S tier, and like, you know, it has an optional town being Pacific Log, which is also creative because it's like floating logs on the water. Oh, there's like the mysterious island that you can only see sometimes, you know, things like that are just like, there's so much mystery to the region.
And there's secret bases.
And secret bases that you could do, and you could design those yourself. Yep. There's
and that feeds into what we loved about Johto so much, right? With the like customization, daily events.
Yep. And then this one has that, but in a different way. That's pretty darn cool in my opinion. But as for the region itself, I'd say it is S tier. So we're gonna go ahead and place Hoenn, the original Hoenn games, in S tier.
Emerald really does an even better job because then you have all these additional features to it. Anyways, but we should move on to the next thing.
And you get the Sky Tower. Yep.
Yeah, what are we going to next?
So now it's gonna be Fire Red and Leaf Green, which not only include Kanto, a revamped Kanto, but also include the Sevi Islands. And I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm gonna go ahead and say it. The Sevi Islands to me are also S tier. And I think that Kanto, the way that they revamped it in Fire Red and Leaf Green, made it a lot better than the originals. I don't know what it is exactly that they did with it. Maybe it's the color palette, maybe it's the assets that they used to spruce up the visuals in this particular game. But I remember actually really enjoying Kanto and Fire Red and Leaf Green, even though I didn't enjoy it in other iterations of Kanto. So what are your thoughts on all of that?
I mean, if we're talking about the region, I think it's kind of plagued by the same things as not as the originals, but just as the first like 4 generations, right? It's limited by the technology. But I think you are right that I'm in the same boat. I've also really enjoyed Fire Red Leaf Green. I've played those so many times on my GameCube. I think it's really special to go through this game. I remember it was like amazing to play through with a Charizard, and by the time it was a Charmeleon, it was like it already had Metal Claw, right? Having a Steel type move in a Gen 1 game. Yep. That was really cool. Also, all the Pokemon that know Bite, those are Dark type moves. Things like that felt really special. And I remember, I ate this region up. So I played this recently. It had been a couple of years, but I played this recently, and I brought my Hoenn team, my Hoenn champion team. I brought it to Fire Red Leaf Green to play through the Sevi Islands. Mm-hmm. And I'll say it kind of is I love the Sevi Islands. I love that they actually added to Kanto, because that's something that they are so afraid to do until Legends Arceus, right? Mm-hmm. But I do think it is also it's a lot of grass, a lot of trees, a lot of water. So it's similar to that, but I do think it's really special that they actually added something when they totally did not need to do that. And I still don't know if this is, I don't know. I like the game, but as a region, I think there are better iterations.
Okay.
I don't know. I really am kind of conflicted, because you're right. The Sevi Islands add so much, and I wish the Sevi Islands return in another iteration of Kanto, whenever that is inevitably going to come.
I have a lot to say about this, so strap up your boots.
Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
And this might change your mind. I'm hoping I change your mind with this. Okay, so let's talk about just Kanto for a minute, and the way that it's handled in Fire Red Leaf Green. So I already mentioned that like the assets and the visuals for how they spruced up Kanto in this version made it more endearing in the first place. But I also think that a big part of why I enjoyed the region more is because the pacing was improved based solely on the fact that we had new moves with new typings for all the new Pokemon, and we also had glitches. There's no glitches. Yeah, there's less glitches. And then I don't know if they actually redid the balancing of the game or not, but I just specifically remember the pacing feeling much, much better in Fire Red and Leaf Green. And part of that is definitely the movesets. Go ahead.
If I could hop in, I think that actually might be because of the Gen 3 engine. I know in the shiny hunting community, Gen 3 is coveted for how quickly you can run through encounters. And I think there's just things in the engine where it's you get into an encounter, it happens, moves are quick, everything's just so quick. The whole it's so quick. So that might be part of it, and I do agree with you.
Yeah, maybe that is part of it. So I thought it was great. I also think, I can't remember, I think they started hinting at the Sevi Isles while you're doing the main game, and they changed a few things about the story within the main game too to kind of reflect that. And I think that also added a layer of mystery that the originals just didn't have, simply put. The dungeons and all, they had different visuals based on which dungeon you were in this time, so it's easier to differentiate them. And then, again, they gave use to the port at Vermilion, with it giving you access to the Sevi Isles. And so now we'll talk about the Sevi Isles, which I compare heavily to Johto, which we already know is one of my favorites. So with the Sevi Isles being a reflection of Johto, and also including a lot of Johto Pokemon, because I think it was their way of trying to get the Pokemon from the first 2 generations so that you could trade them into Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's accurate.
No, yeah, you are. No, you are right. I think you are right. I remember there's so many wild Pokemon that are from Johto. Mm-hmm. I remember getting you get all the evolution items in that area.
Yep. There's an unknown quest too, so that you
can get those.
Yeah. So things like that went a long way. And every time there's 7 islands, right? That's a lot of islands. And every time you go to a new island, I remember being so excited to see what was new and different about this island, because they all felt pretty different from a layout perspective. Like you said, visually they were pretty similar with like it's like a grassy island, you know, for the most part anyway, for most of them. But I thought that like the way that they handled the structure of each island was pretty interesting, because, you know, you had one that had like a big volcanic area, you had one that had a bunch of beaches and like some little islands scattered throughout too, with this like mysterious cavern at the end of one that I remember has like a long strip upwards to that other island from that same island. And just like things like that that I think went a long way in making the Sevi Isles be mysterious.
I'm remembering now, there's an underground hot cavern. There's like that's super memorable. There was
like a warehouse for Team Rocket too that had another dungeon with the puzzles and stuff.
There's like a rock memorial statue for one of the trainers, you know, past or late Steelixes or late Onyxes. You know what, it is pretty special. I think so. That the thing I think that bothers me the most about, I guess not Hoenn, but the other 3 regions before Gen 4, is the fact that the wild encounters are so similar and limited, right? And for me, the Sevi Islands reminds me of the rest of Kanto, where it's mostly Rattata and Pidgey and Spearow and Fearow and Tentacool. You get a lot of that, and I think that's what bothers me. But maybe that's more of the game side rather than the region itself. I think it's absolutely spectacular that they actually did give us something additional for Kanto. I keep saying it. I just want a Johto remake that includes Kanto and everything about HeartGold, SoulSilver, and the Sevi Islands.
Oh, that would be
That is
cool.
my dream game. That is my dream game.
That's what Let's Go should have been. But
it should have
alas,
been. But
that is not
we'll
what
get
we
to
got. Okay, so it sounds to me like even by the end, I don't think either of us is convinced that that Fire Red Leaf Green's region is S tier. As much as I love the Sevi Isles and think they're great, I think you had a good point about them being, you know, relatively samey visually. Like there wasn't too much to spice up with that regard, but I think that the design of them was good.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. No, I'm sorry for interrupting, but it's just like, for me, it's like it is good and it is a better game, but the region is pretty much the same region as what we just gave a C tier to.
Yeah, and you still we can't deny that fact with Kanto, right? I agree. Yeah. So I would say that because it's 2 regions and that they did some things to improve Kanto, and also did a pretty decent job with the Sevi Isles, in my opinion, we can safely put this into A tier, so just a little above the neutral.
We can do that. I think I would want it somewhere in between those two, but we can put it in A tier.
If only there was like another tier that we could make. I mean, we technically could make it
lowercase a.
Lowercase a. So I'll put it at the end of A.
Good.
How about that? We'll just put it at the end of A.
Okay, that sounds good.
So this was Fire Red and Leaf Green.
Because I do have tons of memories with these games. Like, I don't want to say that the games are bad, but if we're talking about the region specifically, that's mostly what I'm like fixating on.
Yeah, I feel that. Okay.
So, but I'm excited for the next thing.
Yeah. And the next thing is Sinnoh, right? Right, that's the next thing. Okay, yeah. So, Diamond, Pearl, Platinum. We deal with the Sinnoh region based on the Hokkaido region of Japan. And when I first played these way back in the day, I actually really loved this region. Replaying BDSP reminded me of the region. And because it's exactly the same as Diamond and Pearl. Like, they didn't change anything about the region in BDSP. So, I didn't like it as much on a second playthrough. So, I think a lot of it was nostalgia and just like me being small and wanting to know what the region looked like again, because it's another new region that we were getting at the time and things like that. But I'm more curious about your thoughts actually on this one, because I don't think that mine are particularly special when it comes to my opinions on Sinnoh. So what do you think here?
So my relationship with the Sinnoh games is a little weird. I feel like those games came out when I was in my everyone has one, my period where I left the Pokemon franchise and I was like too cool for it or whatever.
I
do remember finally. Yeah, it was short lived. It must have been like 8 months or something. like a like a 2 school semesters or whatever. Anyways, I did play Diamond and Pearl. I played Pearl version. It was fun. I think Sinnoh is, other than the snow, like the snowy area, to me Sinnoh is just a better Kanto.
I can agree.
And I don't even want to like explain anything more because I'm like, we all just played it. I think there's some special locations, but to me, I'm like, the lakes. People love the lakes. I think the lakes are super boring.
I think so too. Yeah.
I think all of Mount Coronet is super confusing and boring.
Yes. Yeah.
The only
boring,
interesting thing you can get there is Clefairy. Everything else is Golbat and Graveler, and I'm like, that's all boring.
I think there's a Phoebus too that you can get in one of the, or maybe that's just BDSP, but I can't remember.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, there's like a lake that you can get a Phoebus with in the originals, really low encounter rate, and it's only on like 1 tile, I think, in the originals.
So, and I do think there are a lot of cool areas in like the later half of the game. I think the Pokemon are cool in Sinnoh, but in the later half you have the snowy region, you have where you get Heatran, you have the battle area, and then it's where you get the sandstorm and the fire, all that cool stuff. I think there's a lot of cool stuff with that, and there's a lot of awesome islands off the west coast where you get a lot of cool mythical and legendary Pokemon. That's all great stuff, but to me it's like it's extra. In the core of the game, I never have fun with, hey, do you want to split up Diamond and Pearl and Platinum? Because I actually think Platinum is better because of the selection of Pokemon you can get.
Sure. We can actually, because I think that Platinum and Diamond and Pearl are pretty significantly different from a game design perspective.
I think so.
So with Diamond and Pearl, I think you have a good point here. It's pretty average. Do you think it's underwhelming though? Like, do you think we should put it below neutral? What do you think?
Yeah, on my tier list right now, I have it as not good. I have it as D list.
Oh my.
I think the region, I'm not talking about the game, but the region itself, I think is so just whatever.
You know, I think I might agree because replaying it, I remember like in the originals, for some reason, I really liked that like post-game island, but replaying it, I was like, it's kind of boring actually. So yeah, let's go ahead and put
and that's for Diamond and Pearl, because
yeah,
honestly, I think playing through Platinum, it is a better engine, so it's quicker, it's more enjoyable, and the region feels more alive because you can catch so many new Pokemon. Like I loved being able to capture Ralts, or actually being able to evolve my Electabuzz, right? Or catching Electabuzz and then evolving it, or actually being able to get an Eevee and evolving that. Like those are things you just can't do in Diamond and Pearl. In BDSP for that
So what
matter.
I did was I put Diamond and Pearl in the C tier, but I put it ahead of the original games because you said it's a better Kanto, which I can agree with for sure.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. That's fair.
Yep.
That's fair. And then like I put Platinum in neutral, but because it's the region we're looking at. We're looking at the region, not the game.
And in Platinum, like you were saying, like they changed aspects about the region. So like the Pokemon disbursement is different, and I think also they upgraded visuals too, if I'm not mistaken, for like not only like some parts of the overworld, but also like inside of buildings and things like that to give more atmosphere. And the way that you have to like trek through the region in Platinum is also different. You don't have this huge dead spot of gyms from like, I think you go through like 3 or 4 towns without a gym battle in the Diamond and Pearl games, but then in Platinum they changed that to where like you keep going with the gym challenge as you go, and it makes it more enjoyable to trek through that part of the region. So I think that also goes a long way in making the region feel better. I
think that's fair. I think that's totally fair.
So I agree with you then. I'm gonna go ahead and put Platinum into true neutral because I think the region itself is good when it's utilized properly. And Platinum utilized it better than Diamond.
And we do see that, and in other iterations of that body of land, there are better ways to do it.
We will get there. Absolutely. Which brings us... What are you going to say?
Not to harp on Johto again, but here we come.
Oh, yeah. So HeartGold, SoulSilver is our next topic. And for me, I actually think that they improved the Kanto side of these games, but I think they also, well, they didn't make the Johto side worse because they also added a new area. So I think that they
yeah.
kind of evened it out, but I am really mad to this day about how they changed Olivine City. Olivine.
What was changed?
So Olivine in the original Johto region was my personal favorite town of all of them because of the way it was structured in a very creative way. To get to the port in Olivine in the originals, you went through this like underground path that goes under the water, and then you come back up in this nice little lagoon that like takes you to where you can hop on the ship to go somewhere else. And it was really nice how that was structured, and I thought it was so cool and creative, and it like made my little young me mind just like get really creative with how places could be structured, because I'd never seen
I know
something
exactly
like
what
that.
you're talking about. Yeah.
So okay.
Yeah.
And on top of
that's
that,
where I used to get Chinchou every playthrough. I would get
yes,
Chinchou.
yes, and also there used to be a lake next to the lighthouse, and that was another place you could get Chinchou and a few other like Pokemon that you could fish out of that area, and you could access the full beach from Olivine instead of having to exit out onto the route before getting to the full beach that also goes down to Cianwood and the Whirl Islands. Yes. So Olivine City was my favorite city in the originals because of the ways that you could, it was so open to every, like all these different ways that you could play around with it. You could catch Chinchou in that lake or in the lagoon or in the ocean. And then you could also get into the ocean from Olivine and quickly get into the route from there too, which I did by accident. And that was part of the magic for me. But in the remakes, they border off the water in, I don't think you can even enter the water in Olivine in the remakes at all. There's like a guide there, or a fence there that stops you. And then it's not a lagoon that you get to, nor is it like an underground path that goes under the water and spits you out into a lagoon in the remakes. You just like enter a building and then come out on the other side, and then you're just at a dock, and it's just very boring. They got rid of the lake next to the lighthouse, which made the lighthouse a lot less interesting for me, and made it feel smaller and more cramped. Like Olivine felt very small in the remake. Yeah. So
this is good insight.
Heavily downgraded Olivine.
See, okay, so my take, because that's interesting, because I do like Olivine. I spent a lot of time there, but like for me, like HeartGold SoulSilver is so much more vibrant and colorful, and you see it in it's the most updated Gen 4 engine. So to me, it's like it was, dude, you have the following Pokemon. That's the game.
Oh yes, yeah.
but for me, it's like everything I love about Johto, but it's updated where I can actually see it more. What I'm getting from you is that like you actually liked being able to apply your imagination for what certain things were, and you like that simplicity, which is actually, that's interesting. That's an interesting take. For me, like I love the addition of that whole western area for Cian.
Yes,
Cianwood
I
City.
did too. Yes, it was great. I think it was much needed too to make Cianwood a little more have more of a point.
And I think they made all the towns way more unique, where they didn't feel like just grassy forest areas. So there's a lot of like like
Ekritik especially.
And when you enter a dungeon, do you remember those little cards?
Yes, they had visual cards. Yep.
I didn't
like artwork.
You know what? Yeah, those were in Fire Red, Leaf Green first, and I guess I didn't think of that, but that really does add a lot to the region, because you're seeing the game from a different perspective. Yep. And that returned in HeartGold SoulSilver.
And back then, again, it also still helped with the imagination, because 2D is still kind of a especially back then with the limitations, was still where we could still use our imaginations to really fill in a lot of blanks. And what you were saying about the follow Pokemon, you were like, that's the game, not the region. But no, I would argue that that's part of what makes you appreciate a region more, is being able to have your Pokemon out with you to enjoy the region together. And so that's I think it also does amplify the region as well. So as much as Olivine got really ripped apart in this, I think that they did do what you said, which was for the rest of the region make it look better and more unique depending on the area. Like Ekritik looked completely unique, you know. They also gave different music to Ekritik versus Cianwood this time, which is really nice.
Yeah, that's
different
true.
Remixes.
We haven't talked about music once, but the music in Johto in Gen 4 is tremendous. Yeah. Anyways, I think
Johto has the best music too, so
So I want to give, for nostalgia reasons, but also for all the other things we said about the original games, I want to make this a perfect game. I think this is S tier. I think this is S tier. And a lot of that comes down to nostalgia, but I think essentially it's 2 regions in 1, and they're full scale this time.
And they improved both. For more so than
yeah.
You know, they ruined one city, but that's all they did. They only ruined one city.
Point.
Everything else looks amazing, and it's like I feel like Olivine was like somewhere I didn't want to be in this version, but maybe it's just because of how they changed it that I felt that way. Maybe
I really do think
different.
I know what you're talking about. Like I think Olivine City felt very like it didn't like I think the old games it felt dirty. It felt like I was actually in like I was imagining like I was watching like Pirates of the Caribbean and I'm like a pirate at a port city, and this like in SoulSilver HeartGold like it did feel very like clean.
They made it very clean, like with the visuals, like they gave it like its own different ground towards the edge near the water, but it was also fenced off, so it's like you couldn't even enter the water, you know. It was a little too clean cut for me, and I also didn't like the remix of the music as much as the original, because the original had a really chill track for it. It made me feel really chill and just like at home, but then the remix was it's like it bursts with life, but the town is more boring than it was in the original, so it's like you made this town more boring but gave it a more upbeat and exciting track version.
It sounds like they're overcompensating.
They were trying to overcompensate, and also just like I don't think that melody works as well with it being bombastic as compared to a chill track. But you can revert it to the original anyway later on in the game, so.
That's true.
So I'm going to try to like overlook that because they improved both Kanto and Johto. You know, like we actually had the forest in Kanto this time. We had the burned Cinnabar Island actually had some flavor to it this time, you know, things really like cool. that. So
in the Dragon's Den, there's so many awesome locations in Johto.
Yes. Oh, I love it.
There's so many awesome locations.
Yeah, and they gave it more aesthetic and flair in the remakes. Yeah, so yeah, let's go ahead and put this one in S tier. I'm not going to argue with you over that one. I also think they fixed a lot of the like pacing and Pokemon disbursement issues as well in this version. Well, was there anything else that you wanted to say about the revamped Johto Kanto region? I don't think so. I think we're in pretty much agreement here that it's just.
I'm just happy it exists.
Me too.
I'm happy it exists. I think it's slowly become. I was actually just reviewing this in another video that it's actually one of the worst selling remakes. But I think but I think it's unanimously decided that like it is the fans' best. It's the best Pokemon game. That's what a lot of people say.
They also added more to the replayability, or not replayability, but like lifespan of the game, because they added more to the days and weeks and night cycle. That you can do, especially with the gym leaders in Elite Four. But okay, let's go ahead and talk about the Unova region, because that was the one that we saw in Black and White and Black 2 and White 2. So we can count these kind of separately because you see some more areas in Black 2, White 2. So let's talk about the original Unova first in Black and White. And you've mentioned before that this is like this was their biggest soft reboot that they've done, and I agree with that, but mainly because the region is the first one, like you said, to not take place in Japan.
100%. And also, like, having a completely new Pokedex. I mean, you make a good point. The Pokemon really do make up the region, right? You can't have a Pokemon game region without the Pokemon. And this is the first time. So Black and White were the games where you can only use the new 156 Pokemon that were introduced in Gen 5 until the post-game. And that makes a big difference because you're playing through this brand new region with Pokemon that are brand new that you have no memories with. Not even Charizard, not even Pikachu, like brand new Pokemon. Yeah, I'm with you. Yep. So how frequently do you go back to Black and White? Because I mostly play Black 2, White 2.
Same.
And Black, yeah. I think it's because there are some favorites that I like to use. Where with Black and White, it's like I make a new team and it is fun. And the Pokemon are old enough now where like I do have memories with them. I feel like so visually I think Unova is as expressive as maybe a Johto or a Hoenn. But I think the structure of the region is like of Kanto. It's very linear. The structure of the region in Black and White.
So I don't mind linearity. I personally don't think it's a detriment to have a linear region. So I'm going to focus when I talk about it more so about like how the region itself is, just like how interesting it is as you keep going, you know?
Yeah.
I would say that it kept me fairly interested. There's a lot of bustling cities in this region, like
that
more
was
than
that
one.
was one of its hallmarks.
Yes. So like remember in previous games, it would be like one bustling city, sometimes two, maybe
And you could
three.
visually see maybe like 10 buildings, where in this game the DS was at its peak of right, like this was the like one of the last DS games to come out, where they were pushing the limits of the 3D, and you could literally like you couldn't even count how many buildings there were.
It was cool too because not only did they make an interesting region, in my opinion, I think it was a great region, but they also did things with the visuals that showcased the region in a really cool way that made it even more memorable. So like obviously we know that they had weather effects on the screen with that engine, but even cooler than that was the use of angles going into certain towns and areas. Because like remember when you get to the big New York City area, and it like actually shifts the angle downward to where you're looking up at the buildings as you walk, while you're a 2D sprite walking up to these 3D buildings, you know, things like that had so much impact because the art style was so strikingly good, and also because they were pushing the limits and making it more immersive with those different angles, which is a first for the series. I think that it was so well done.
I think I do agree. I mean, you're right. Linearity is not a bad thing inherently. And if I'm looking at an image of the Unova region right now, and it seems like right after the first couple routes, it's similar to Kanto where you go through the forest, but that what is it called? The Pinwheel Forest. But already, like it's like a really great region or a really great location. There's like things to climb in and out of. Like there's a lot of detail. Where all the locations that you visit, it's detailed, and I think that's really important. There's even some small details like outside of the forest. It's like a lumber yard, and what Pokemon do you catch? You catch Timber, the Pokemon that's literally carrying lumber.
Yeah. They were mindful
that makes sense
about
in the region.
Yep, they were mindful about which Pokemon were where, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, and they do continue that in the future. But yeah, I think you said it. I didn't think of that, but. Yeah, just being able to place Pokemon where they should be in the region and making it feel more lived in, and I think that's it's great. Yeah, and
there were really good dungeons in this game, right? Like I remember Twist Mountain, and there was like an electric dungeon, if I'm not mistaken. But I would also argue the overworld itself becomes a dungeon in itself because the different seasons open up different puzzles in the overworld and different ways you can progress through those routes, which is really cool as well. So I think
that alone is actually amazing. I don't know how I forgot about seasons.
Yeah,
that is truly the fact that anytime you go back to a region or back to a location, no matter what time of year, it's gonna look different. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, so they gave it a big lifespan because of that, and they also, if I'm not mistaken, this brought back the use of phones. I don't know if it worked exactly the same as the Johto games.
They were it was like FaceTiming.
Was it only tied to the story? Do you remember if like NPCs could call you and stuff? I think they could.
Yes, it was used in the story, but you could also call people for certain things. So like instead of visiting the professor to get your dex rated, you give him a call or give her a call. But you know what? The more I look at this region, there really are a lot of cool locations. Seeing the desert outside of the city, so you go from the forest to the city. Oh.
And you can find like a pseudo legendary in it too, which is really cool.
And you know what? Everything I'm about to say, I keep thinking, oh, but then it gets better in Black 2, White 2, because you can explore the sewers. Of the Castelia city. Which I thought was the coolest thing. And what are you gonna find there? Obviously, the two trash Pokemon. Rattata and Zubat are the only Pokemon you can get in the sewer.
And Trubbish too, right? Can't you get a Trubbish and Grimer?
Yeah, you can. You probably can as well. Yeah, that would make sense. It's like it made me appreciate those Pokemon when they returned. I'm like, why am I excited for Rattata?
Yeah, I think in this one they were more mindful about which Pokemon they put where, which is really cool to me. And then just wanted to present the region in a more creative way. I think this was the first time they had a camera what do you call it, like a camera in the engine where it like moves and things like that with where you're going. Dynamic camera, that's what I'm looking for.
Okay.
This is the first game they made that they use that all the time now, but this is the first game that gave us a dynamic camera, and just like other ways of presenting the region that I think were just really amazing. And while I do think that Black 2 White 2 did it even better and also added even more areas, I think that maybe Unova in general, both for Black and White and Black 2 and White 2, as for the region, I think it's S tier in both games.
Both games?
Yeah.
You know what? I mean, I don't have as much nostalgia tied to this. Like, we're looking at the game covers. I think you might be right. Yeah.
If you disagree about the originals, I will put the originals in A tier and second the sequels in S tier.
I would be happy with that because they essentially offer the same things. And even though Black 2 and White 2 are sequels, and you can revisit the places, what Black and White 2 does is like all of a sudden you're doing the Kanto Johto thing where you go, like in Black 2 White 2, the post game is essentially the starting route in Black and White. So rather than just seeing 2 Pokemon in the beginning, you're seeing level 50, 60, Wigglytuff, Audino, like all the Pokemon that were level 1. There's like things like that, and I feel like because of that, there's a separation there.
I think another thing that separates it is the Pokemon that you, in my opinion, and in a lot of people's opinion, the Pokemon designs for the 5th generation are very hit or miss. And because in Black 1 and White 1, they only did the new Gen 5 Pokemon, half the time I didn't want to catch the Pokemon, nor did I care about them. And I think a lot of people feel that way. So acknowledging that versus Black 2, White 2, where they also had some banger older Pokemon to mix in with the new ones, I think that also goes a long way in making you appreciate the region more. So I will agree. All right, let's go ahead and put Black 1 and White 1 in A tier because of the reasons we mentioned, and then Black 2, White 2.
This is completely unrelated, but my mom just sent me this message. Those are old Brock and Misty figurines that she just found at her house. My mother just sent me this just now.
Oh, nice.
Completely unrelated, but...
Little Dusty playing with his Pokemon toys. I had Pokemon toys too, until my mom threw them all out.
Oh no.
Those things were probably worth a lot too. So it's like, not only did you throw them out when I wanted to keep them, but also
they could have paid for college.
Exactly. It's too bad. Oh well. Anyway.
So we're putting Black and White in A tier, and then
Black 2, White 2.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yep.
I'm happy with that. I really am.
Me too.
Imagine if seasons come back. That would be excellent.
Sounds like a lot of work for them, especially with how much more they have to do in like the 3D world now. But
with the 3D,
maybe over time, like if they get more experience and more comfortable with the hardware they're developing on, like they did with Black and White, then they could probably do it. But let's go ahead and move on to arguably when the region started. Well, okay.
Yeah, there's two things here, Johnny. It's like the character of the region itself, and then how we interact with the region based on the technology in the game. I think those are two things we have to differentiate, because say your piece. I got some opinions.
So we're okay. To make it clear, we are getting into X and Y here.
Yes.
I think that X and Y were good regions. They had really good regions, really beautiful locales, some really fun areas, but the over-centralization of Lumio City, and for me, with that obnoxious track, I hated the music in Lumio City. It's like the same 5 notes repeated ad nauseum.
I just put that in my new video.
Because of that, and also some of the routes were immemorable. All the ones that didn't use something visual to spice them up, like I remember like the desert area was very boring, and like the dungeons were kind of boring too. If there was I only remember the power plant.
The dungeons were linear tracks. There were some areas where you could move freely, but there were a lot that were like single corridors.
Yeah. And
that felt like a shortcut. Looking back, that's probably a shortcut on their end. Like, we don't have time to flesh this out.
There was also a lot of like unreasonable roadblocks that just felt really annoying, like the blackouts in Lumiose, and then like not being able to go when you get to Lumiose and it's in the center and you can't go. It feels like you should be able to go to whichever direction you want at that point. And unlike previous games, for some reason in this one, maybe it's because it was 3D and the camera angle made it more immersive, I felt like I should have. Yeah, I felt like I should have been able to go, but they did not let me go whichever way I wanted. And then
Because Castelia City was so much fun and so immersive, even though it was a 2D game.
Yeah.
And then once you bring that to 3D, it's like it's like all of a sudden they were a big fish in a small pond.
Yeah, and also the way the camera worked. The camera worked really weird in Lumiose.
It was jarring and confusing.
It was confusing.
That being all said, I do think it's like kind of beautiful. Like when I see like official art of the Kalos region, like in concept, I think Kalos is beautiful. It's
even in the game.
France. There are certain things about it, that are really pretty and beautiful. And there's history. It's like knights, it's kings, it's queens. It's cool. There's a lot of cool things about the region.
Stonehenge there, yeah.
Yeah, which is weird because it's France. But like,
yep.
But it's like, I just don't think it was as fun to play through, and I think that is important when ranking regions, right? This is a video game. This isn't a piece of art. Like it's not a drawing. It's literally like it's interactive.
Part of it was how slow and clunky the game was. It didn't run very well, especially if you put 3D on. It got really bad, really dicey. The pacing of the game felt really off, and it made me not enjoy the region as much as I should have, I feel like.
Sure.
One of the ride Pokemon that you had to use for like, I think it was like rocky ground and use like a Mudbray or something. Those segments, or maybe it's like a Rhino Pokemon. I don't remember. But
it's Rhyhorn. I thought you were gonna.
Oh, okay.
I thought you were gonna talk smack about Go-Go. But yeah.
No. It's just like I remember those segments feeling really clunky to play through and unenjoyable.
Yeah.
Because you could also encounter Pokemon while doing that. That's what it was.
Yeah.
So you're trying
Which was kind of cool. I did like that part.
I didn't.
I liked that, but yeah, it was like being the controls were so bad. It was a 3D area, but you could only move forward and backwards or you had to turn and then go straight.
Yeah, and obnoxiously get
so weird
Pokemon encounters while doing so. I hated it. Yeah. Oh gosh. So I feel like there were some nice areas to Kalos, but all in all, even the nice areas didn't have any description to them. Like I remember there's like a Snorlax thing, or am I thinking about a different game? Wasn't there like
no, there was a Snorlax,
yeah, there's like a Snorlax, not island but like rock or something with like a gem
there was
on
a
it.
Snorlax that was like in the way. To me, honestly, X and Y, because of how not fun they are to play and because of how desaturated the region is, like just visually they're very desaturated. Everything is
the colors
in X and Y. Like I don't want to say not good, but I would say C tier maybe, because the Kalos region in theory is really nice.
In theory, yes.
Everything is in theory. In theory, it's really nice.
In theory, it's really nice, but but with its delivery, I think it's not very good.
Yeah.
So
but
okay,
I'm gonna leave it up. Yeah, it's up to you.
I'm with you. Let's go ahead and put it in C tier. I'm doing that
All
now. We're gonna put X and Y in.
And if you disagree, leave a comment, because I know there's a lot of you out there who love X and Y. X and Y was your first game. Let me know why. I'm sure you. Yeah.
And Kalos in general, like I feel like it has so much potential to be as good as it was intended to be, but it just did not feel like it reached it. I don't even think it like reached a neutral. I think it like failed on a lot of accounts of what it was trying to do way too much.
It sold well.
Yeah, it did. I mean, it was the first 3D Pokemon game for mainline, so...
There's a lot of games that sell well that are very good.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and move on to the revamped version of Ruby and Sapphire, which I don't think we should dwell on too long because they didn't really change much about the region, if I'm not mistaken. They made it more visually appealing, which is great.
I'll give it that.
Which is great for what they did, right?
The thing I don't like about Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, and I this might just be my bias showing, but I think it's because the battles are no longer... Like, I don't like the 3D models. I don't like playing through a game with the 3D models a second time. I never play any of these games again because of the 3D models and the battle animations. Like, I'm always dreading battling. It feels too quick. The EXP share... Maybe this is a conversation for when we discuss like a game itself, But you're right. The region is so much prettier, and you can soar in the sky.
I was gonna say that. Yeah.
There's so many positive additions. I think it's not as nostalgic for me, but I would say the region is the same or better.
Yeah, so I really like that they were very faithful to the originals in this one, but also made things better that I think could have used it, like Maulville being an actual giant mall now, which is really funny, play on the name, and then like soaring through the sky.
I never noticed that. Was Maulville named Maulville because it's supposed to be like, I don't know.
It's not spelled like mall, if I'm not mistaken, but they literally made it a mall in the remake, which is really funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So I thought that was really cool, and they
they took liberties. They actually added to the lore, especially in the post game with even the
Delta
post-game
episode and all that. Yeah.
And Rayquaza's tower is really epic.
Yeah. Yeah. And they like just being able to soar through the sky again is like a whole nother layer to the region that makes you enjoy it. And I think that was really a really nice touch. So all in all, it's still S tier, just like the originals. And I think that I might just put them in front of the originals just because it's, essentially a better version.
Yeah.
Essentially a better
I didn't realize I didn't know we were both Hoenn fans. This is good. I've been seeing a lot of Hoenn hate recently.
It's funny enough, it's not my favorite region at all. I actually don't like it that much, but I can't deny it's the best region in all of Pokemon. It's so cool. It's a very cool region. Like, there's no denying that I had a blast just seeing every new area as they came.
Yeah.
All right.
There was like a level of realism in the earlier generations. So this is cool.
Yeah, it's more fantasy in the remake, which is not bad, but
no.
Yeah, or more fantasy visually than the realism, but we're going from what I think to be the best region, which was Hoenn, to what I think is probably the worst region in all of Pokemon, and that is Sun and Moon with the Alola region. What are your thoughts, though, on the Alola region?
Yeah, it's interesting you say you think this is the worst, because I think, again, in theory, this is one of the greatest generations. Sorry, one of the greatest regions. I think it's so colorful and beautiful, and there's so many. It's got a Johto feel, where there's like very specific Pokemon for times of day, locations. There's a lot of intricacies with the Pokemon in the locations, and I appreciate that a lot. I think it's colorful. It's tropical. Maybe I've just got the summer bug, and I can't wait to go to the beach. But honestly, like when I think back to Sun and Moon, I think it does a lot of cool stuff. Also, like Johto, there's the main hub, but then in the post game, you instead of going to another region, you go to another dimension. You go to multiple other dimensions, which I think is really cool.
Isn't that only in Ultra?
Yeah, but the Ultra Beasts are in Sun and Moon.
Oh, yeah, they are, but I don't know. I actually never played Ultra.
Those are my opinions.
I never played Ultra, so I don't know if that changes anything about the region. Does Ultra change anything about the region? No, right?
No, so yeah, it changes things about the story, and then there's like mini games. Yeah,
there's like the Mantine surfing. I remember seeing that.
Yeah, when those are really fun things that help with the region. Like, I think this is one of the first games where there's like side quests.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that was X and
Y. Maybe. But I remember in Sun and Moon, like, people will be like, "Oh, do you have this? Can you go get this for me?" So, I won't lie to you, Johnny. I have not played this game recently. It's probably been since 2017. It's 5 years ago. I'm not gonna lie to you and say like I know everything about Sun and Moon and the Alola region, but I do have a lot of great memories with the Alola region, and I think it's very colorful, and I think it delivers where Kalos does not deliver. Even though in concept they're both very colorful regions, I think the execution is better in Generation 7.
Oh yeah.
The story is not. The story, it's tough to play through again. I'm talking too much.
Maybe it is. I don't know. I've only played through it the once. So I want to preface this. Sun and Moon, I think, is a great game. It's a great Pokemon game. So some of my favorites in like the long list of Pokemon games. But even though I love Sun and Moon, I think they were great. And like you said, I think they delivered on everything and presented things better than X and Y. The region, I think it was so weak it was probably the only time in a Pokemon game that I noticed how linear it was. As someone who, like, I'm not
That's
even,
fair.
I don't think I'm that critical of games if they're made well and enjoyable, if they're enjoyable games, you know? But this one I noticed. So like, just how, this is, I mean, this is a whole nother topic.
That's a very good point. That is a very good point. It is linear, and that's why it's so difficult to replay it, even though so for me, there's like memorable locations where I can't really, the places in Kalos that I remember, I don't think of fun. I just think of like maybe the Pokemon. But like in Kalos, in Alola, there's like, I go, oh, that's like a spooky mansion. That's like something that like we've seen, but never to this extent. Or look at this forest, or anyways.
So it delivered things pretty well, but because the region was so linear, and also one note, because it was all tropical island,
True.
all of it. Like, even the areas that were slightly different were still, like, they had palm trees, you know, and things like that. It was a little too one note for me. And then on top of that...
That's true. There wasn't the same level as exploration on the volcano as there was in Hoenn.
Yeah.
So, as an example.
And then on top of that, the areas I don't think were very memorable at all. I can remember maybe 3 places. There was one where I could find Mineor, but that area wasn't necessarily memorable. It was just the fact that I found Mineor there that was memorable. And then where else can I remember? I don't really remember a lot of the region because it was pretty boring. There was like one beach that had Pyukumuku or something like that, and people would throw them into the water, but that's all I can really remember. I think the region was, I don't want to say boring, but it wasn't structured well. And also the way that you have to travel from island to island, I think was bad structure for traveling through a region.
I agree. I think before the game came out, I wasn't on YouTube, but I would have been making videos about how that it's amazing. We're going to be able to traverse in the water to go through the different regions. And that totally is not what happened. We got a mini game with Mantine Surf, but it's not the same.
And it doesn't help that each island has a really confusing name, and I can't remember which island's which. So it's like every time I have to choose which island to go to,
That's true.
I couldn't remember which one to go to because they all have really weird names, and then like they look very samey, and they don't show you on the overworld map like parts inside of them.
Yeah, I feel the same way about Kalos, and I feel the same way about what is it? I'm worried it's going to be the same thing with this new Gen 9 region. I'm afraid it's like, because Fuecoco is like based on Spanish, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, there's going to be a bunch of things. I don't know. It's going to be difficult to remember.
Yeah, I don't think I think it'll be easier in Gen 9 because it'll be a more immersive experience. But
yeah,
with Sun and Moon, I don't think the region itself was a strong point of the game. I think it was the weakest part of the game for me. Anyway, I would personally put Alola in the lowest tier because I think it's the worst Pokemon region.
What?
Yeah, I think it's the worst Pokemon region.
I guess we're talking about region, yeah.
Not the game. The game is great. I love the game, but I think the region is very weak, both in its structure and in its visuals of, it's all one note, and then like it's like a Pikachu park, but who wanted a Pikachu park, or something like that? That's a good point.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm trying to think of ways I can combat you right now, and I can't really think of anything. Okay, so let's put Sun and Moon for no good, or for the for the last tier. For D tier.
Sun and Moon are going in D.
I think you do make a good point. Like I said, I think what I really enjoyed about Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon is going through the wormholes, finding Pokemon that are not native to Alola through these wormholes, suggesting to me that like the Ultra Beasts are even though they're poised as not Pokemon, I think the exploration of that is really cool.
So does that mean we should put Ultra a tier higher or no? Because I've never played through it, so I can't say. This is up to you.
I haven't played it in like 4 years, so I'm not gonna act.
So then it couldn't have been that good.
Not good, so we get more comments.
It also couldn't have been that great if you didn't even go back to the game. So,
like I said, yeah, I think I went back to it maybe one time. I played a lot of the post game, but like Gen 8, we went. Yeah,
I can't go back to it, and every time I go back to it, I'm like, I don't know where to go anymore because all these islands make no sense to me, and by name, they all are just like linear routes, and yeah.
You know what? You make a great point with the linearity, like that. When
the
it's done
linearity,
right, it's done right. Because like in Black and White, you can explore all the regions, even though you're forced to go the same path.
Yeah.
So.
And the locales made they were more differentiated in Black and White.
Yeah.
So, but they're not in Sun and Moon. So I can't even tell you which town had certain differences to another town because they all looked the same.
Yeah.
So yeah. So that's why I think it's the weakest region.
Oh, sheesh. All right, let's do it.
All right. So that brings us to Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Let's make this quick.
Yeah,
because
we've talked about it a lot.
Very much the same as the originals. You even went back to just having 150 Pokemon this time.
Yeah.
Meaning, or 151. 152 if you count Melmetal.
Yeah.
Wait, 153 if you count the evolution
153,
of that.
yeah. There's a Mew.
But when it comes to the region, I think they made it prettier. They got rid of Cycling Road and made that like one area. I think that was nice. They also had better visuals than the original, obviously, and they made the dungeons look better.
And there was better encounter rates, which we've established is important in a region, right? You want that Pokemon representation.
Yeah.
You can get Bulbasaur in the first in Viridian Forest. That's so cool.
But above that, they didn't do anything else with the region. They didn't add the Sevi Islands back. They didn't add any new areas.
Yep.
Nothing. Nor did they.
Nothing that was added in Johto. If this game is supposed to be based after, this game is supposed to be like take place after the original story. In my mind, that would mean it lines up with the Johto timeline. So why is Koga a gym leader? Wouldn't his daughter Janine be a gym leader? Why
Maybe they were going. They were going through the paperwork.
You're right. Yeah, like there's so many things I would have rather seen. Like Koga should be it should be the Johto Elite Four. That, and then you face the Johto. Anyways, that's a whole video.
Yeah. So the pacing wasn't much better, but it was better in the sense that you could ride Pokemon to go a little bit faster, which is a more fun way to traverse a region, and it was better in the sense that
you could ride Pokemon.
You
that's
could
cool, yeah.
pick your encounters.
You could get elevated.
Yep. You could also pick your encounters because everything's in the overworld. So I would put this at...
Yeah.
What were you going to say? I want to know what you were going to put
I would put it in the middle.
Yeah, I was going to put it at true neutral.
Because it is better. I think it's prettier than the originals, but only because it was made 25 years later.
Yeah, which isn't saying much because I don't think they upgraded it enough. But I will put it in true neutral just because it was an upgrade on the originals for sure.
And it was pretty epic seeing Mewtwo's cave, Cerulean Cave.
I actually didn't get that far because the game was so boring to me. This was actually the only game that I've regretted my purchase on ever bought in my life because I got it digitally and I can't sell it now, but I spent $60 on it and it was so cheaply made. I felt awful. I felt dirty for the fact that I spent money on it, and that was the first time I ever felt that way with the game ever.
For me, it's like the limitations that they put upon you is so frustrating.
They took items away. Oh, that was another point that I meant to mention for like why the region was so enjoyable in Fire Red and Leaf Green was because you could use held items and then fix the pacing a little bit with that too, on top of the move variations. But this one that goes back to the old moves, no held items, nothing. And I'd argue that like the pacing of like catching Pokemon in this is worse. So
yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So true neutral.
True neutral, that makes sense. And then the next game that we got was
Sword and Shield. Oh,
very interesting game.
Yeah. The topic of the game itself is another discussion, but we're looking at the region today. I like the region a lot. I think Galar's one of my favorite regions personally, but objectively, it's probably... I don't know. This is hard to gauge. What are your thoughts on Galar?
Are we including the DLC?
Yes.
Then I would say it's a very good region. If we're including the DLC, so I'm trying to pull it up right now, the whole map. It's it looks like a massive region, but it really is not.
It's not. No, it's not nearly as big as it looks.
No, it's not. And I remember thinking it was going to be huge. Like I'm like, it's the Gen 8 game. It's finally console. It's gonna.
And
be
there was a
massive.
lot of things on the map that you thought you were going to be able to interact with, like the Ferris wheel and things like that, but nope. There was mountains that I thought we were going to be able to interact with, train lines I thought we were going to be able to take. Nope, none of it.
I thought this was the open world game. And so I would tell you this. You made some great points about Gen 7. Mm-hmm. I think Sword and Shield are limited in similar ways, where it's the bad type of linear game where there's not a lot of places to explore. However, I do think there's a lot of also memorable locations. And the DLC remedies a lot of that. I mean, I wish it was more cohesive. I wish, the only explorable areas weren't only in the wild area. Yeah. Hopefully that's what we get in Gen 9.
That's what we're getting in Gen 9, yeah.
Yeah, hopefully that's what we're getting in Gen 9. And because of that, I mean, I don't think this is like an amazing region, but I do think it has its, based on how much people say they hate Sword and Shield, I think it's pretty good.
So...
And the DLC is a lot of fun.
I will say the reason I love this region so much is, like you mentioned, there's very memorable areas. Very memorable. The Galar Mines 1 and 2, people give them flack for being linear. But they were better than Sun and Moon. There was different ways you could go. There was some hidden stuff in there. And they also just looked really nice to go through. And they did fun things with them. Like there was a rail that the Carcole could ride on during Galar Mine 1. And then in Galar Mine 2, there was just like all the like shining lights and stuff. And you can take out your Pokemon in Pokemon Camp. I think that goes a long way for this region.
Pokemon Camp is nice.
Pokemon Camp is another way you can enjoy the region. So I think that adds to the region when engaging the region, right?
And when and Pokemon Camp changes depending on where you are in the world. So that's actually a great point. You essentially are in the overworld in Pokemon Camp.
Yes.
I don't think it's the same as Pokemon on Me. Like in Kalos, where you're just like in this like jelly bean island.
Yeah, I think there's some wins and losses with it. So you can't pet or feed your Pokemon in it. I mean, you can cook curry, I guess, but that's a whole other mini game. But
I don't know if I can do anything above neutral, to be honest with you.
But I think it's weird because you can't take them to camp in the cities, or you can take them to camp in the cities, but it doesn't put you in the city. It takes you out to the route when you camp in the city. Yeah. It's really weird. In some areas, they just didn't code at all for the camp. So it takes you to like a weird abyss or back to a route or something like that.
That's a good point. And the cities were a lot of fun too.
Yes, I think the cities had really nice design. So I really would have loved to take the Pokemon out in the cities. So that was really a bummer. And then they don't follow you in the overworld when you're in the base game, even in the wild area. The base wild area is awful. I think it's the worst part of the Galar region. The other wild areas, the Isle of Armor and the Crown Tundra, were great. They really are great. I loved the dungeons in the Crown Tundra. I loved the just entire layout of the Isle of Armor. I think it was beautifully designed and very strikingly gorgeous looking, popping up Pokemon aside. But
so if I had to attack the Galar region itself, I think I would want to bring up how in Black and White in Castelia City, that's a huge city, and you can literally go into every single building. Every single building that you have access to, you can go into, and there's floors with different NPCs, characters, everything has a purpose. And maybe not every single city, like there is a lot of things you can do in these cities, but definitely in that last city, it's like everything's empty.
That last city is the worst.
it's so the worst thing in the world.
It's so bad.
That's the big boss battle mission where you're playing hide and go seek with the grunts.
Oh, that was such a bad segment too. Oh my goodness.
Maybe that's more of the game, but
right. But that city in general, it didn't do itself justice. I think it could have looked really good if they just did different angles for the camera. But what they did, for some reason, which I don't know why they did this in the first place, because it's supposed to be a big city, but when you pull a camera out the way that they do in this city, it makes everything look smaller. So not only was that a bad design choice for showcasing the city, but also because they pulled the camera out so far.
Lock in your Northeast Value Pass by May 30th to get buddy tickets.
Are you recording?
Yeah, hold on. I'm gonna cut. But not only does it make the city look smaller because they pulled the camera out, but it also showcases how empty it is until the characters pop in. And not only is there not a lot of characters that pop in on this, so it still feels empty even when they do pop in, but that pop in, it looks so bad in that last city because it feels like you're in this city that it's like a digital city. Like, it feels like you're not in the real world anymore. It feels like you got taken to another dimension and put in this like digital city. Like, it's not actually part of the overworld of Galar. It's really weird to me. And it's because of the pop-in. That's
hilarious. So it's like, I mean, it's obviously a video game and not real life. But if a game is good enough, you're going to feel like you're playing a video game. And in that world, you were literally like, okay, this is just wireframes of what they wanted it to be.
Yes, it took me out way too much. On top of already being taken out by the fact that the city looked small because they pulled the camera away. And on top of the fact that you couldn't interact with all the things that were on the map that you were looking forward to interacting with in this city when you finally get there. It's the last city. You thought it was going to be great, but there's really nothing here, and there's hardly anyone here. And when they are here, they pop in 2 feet in front of you, and the camera angle makes it even more obvious that they're doing that. All they had to do was keep the camera close, maybe angle it up. It would have looked, not only would it have looked better, but you wouldn't have noticed the pop-in, not nearly to the same extent. It might have been not noticed at all if they did it right, but they just didn't think about it, and that really, really irks me. And it's too bad because that city could have looked so cool at the very end.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, like, if we didn't get DLC and we did get a third version or something, like, would they have fixed it? Would it have been better? I guess that's the only perk for having a third version rather than DLC, is they can go back and correct certain parts of the map. I'm not advocating for it, I'm just...
No, you're right.
I'm thinking about it out loud.
I'm with you, though. I wish they had done that, or it makes me look forward to like 20 years from now when we get a remake of Galar, because I think the region in the game deserves so much more than what they did. And then I know that this is a gameplay thing, but it also makes me think about the region. But the Dynamax mechanic making Pokemon all be shrunk down when they're not Dynamaxing, like large Pokemon like Wailord are small in combat, makes me think poorly about the region too, because it's like it's tied to this mechanic that makes the Pokemon look smaller when they're not Dynamaxing, and it breaks the immersion because Wailord's supposed to be really big, but now he's the same size as a 10-year-old.
And the thing is they kind of they fixed that in the overworld. In the wild area, Pokemon are scalable. Actually, everywhere in the region.
Until you enter battle, Yeah,
until you enter battle. That's pretty lame.
Yeah, I don't like that at all.
So, okay.
But I will say, I want to defend the roots.
About this?
I want to defend the roots, though, a little bit, because I think they're kind of fun. I like the ladder, the route with the ladders, in like the kind of like mountainous desert area. I really love that ghost forest. I also really liked that ice route, where it was like kind of a maze.
Yeah, I do like. I was thinking of that one too. I don't know what it's called.
They're actually...
And then you have the whole, like, the Tanglewood Forest. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. That was the Ghost Forest.
Well, then you also have the first forest to the west. You have to the west of your hometown where you find the Box Legendary. It's like the lost forest or whatever. That felt like straight out of Zelda.
Yeah, that one's okay. And I like that arch at the end when you get to where, you have your final encounter with them later on. Things like that. So I think that the routes are better than people give them credit for in Sword and Shield, and there's more that I could talk about if I really cared to take the time. But
could we say, I'm sorry,
even with all its potential and all the things that it did right, especially with the newer wild areas, the game is held back so much by how much they squandered, with the fact you can't interact with these larger cities in any meaningful way, with the way they presented the larger cities, especially that last one. And
another thing I'm thinking about is like only being able to fish in certain locations.
Yes, that too.
That's stupid. I mean, like, to me, I'm like, it's water. I should be able to fish anywhere. I like that much better.
Not being able to take your Pokemon out to play in the cities. And for me, another huge thing that makes the region feel very stale is that once you fight all the trainers in the region, there's no way to refight them.
Yeah.
And so it's like all those routes and stuff that were very nice and memorable,
there's
nothing to do. They're useless. You can't do anything in them anymore. Nothing. You can catch wild Pokemon, but that's it.
I think that's why I remember the Sevi Islands so fondly, because I spent so much time rebattling trainers in the Sevi Islands with the whatever it's called.
The Versus Seeker.
So, dude, okay. And also, Sword and Shield have awful following Pokemon. We begged for it, and they gave it to us, and it's awful.
Oh, don't remind me.
But that's 20 minutes of conversation.
That is a whole nother thing. But that does add to the region, you're right. It makes those nicely designed DLC areas feel a little worse. Yes, I can agree with that.
I mean, a little bit better, but then also like a little bit worse. It's like it just evens out to me.
Depends on which Pokemon's following you, I guess.
So I would put this. I don't know. There are a lot of good things. I feel like it's could we say this is the best of the 3D era so far?
Yes, I would say it's the best of the 3D era.
Because it's still prevented by a lot of these other things that we've said for X and Y and Sun and Moon.
Yeah, I would personally put it at true neutral, only because if it wasn't for the bad presentation and limitations that they bestowed upon us just purely by time constraints, then this would have been an A or even an S tier.
That's crazy.
Region, in my opinion.
That's crazy.
But the pop-in, the bad ways that they utilized trainers to only be battled once.
That makes a difference, man. That really does make a difference.
Huge difference. The way that the Pokemon don't follow you well, even when you're in the better wild areas. The wild area in the original, the base game, just being so ugly and bad. What were some other faults we found? You know, just all these faults that we found that took away, not being able to play with your Pokemon in Pokemon Camp in the city environment. Also,
I really do like Pokemon Camp. Like, there's a lot of great things about that, but yeah. For me, it's really just how linear it is, and I don't think it's as magical or as expressive of a region as the previous two generations.
It could have been.
It could have been. Yeah, it really could have been. And it's like, it just feels like there's lost potential. And like you said, we're gonna have to wait 15 years from now to get a remake.
Yeah. I think it goes into true neutral just because it has really high highs and really low lows that
I agree.
That just clash with each other so hard and put it right in the middle.
Jeez. All right, well now our favorite games of all time.
Oh, well, this is going to be really easy. I'm just going to go ahead and place these.
Yeah, not good. Because if it's on par, so this is D tier. If it's on par with Diamond and Pearl.
Oh, this is D. You think this is D?
Oh, what'd you say?
You know what? I think you're right, because in this one you have the really bad collision.
yeah, that's what it is for me. I like the underground a lot. I was talking to some other people. I like the underground, and it is more expressive. But for me personally, the two things I don't like is like how you interact with the region, how rigid everything is, and then I also prefer the sprite-based animations. And everything. I like the sprite-based region because I can use my imagination.
All right, I have some arguments for you.
Okay.
So with Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, I would put them on par with the originals, because even though the collision is something that is really bad in this one and didn't exist in the originals, and just like the bad design choice of keeping the original design choices for the visuals for the areas, like the galaxy buildings and stuff like that. I do think that visually they made the region look very pretty, especially with like the toy box style and the really realistic water.
That's true.
And I think that the lighting engine was really good, and the environments when you entered battle. The environments when you entered battle, I thought looked really good and really made the region look pretty.
I think that's fair. Yeah. So are you saying this would be C tier?
I would put it in C tier just because, like, I feel like it does some things better and then does some things worse. Like, the underground is obviously worse in my opinion.
Well, I love encountering Pokemon in the underground. That makes me feel like it's the wild
You like
area.
it?
I do like it. I don't think it's better than the original. I think it should. If we had secret bases in BDSP, it would have been the best.
Yeah, I think it's worse because they took away all the things that made secret bases fun. They took away the flag game. They also that wild area that they put down there, it's clunky. That's where the collision is at its worst, because it's supposed to be fully 3D, but yet they still have the same 2D collision for some reason down there with the rocks.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, the Pokemon look really weird. Yeah, but
there were no limitations.
I thought the Pokemon looked really weird down there anyway. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And then it also was very samey. It's very boring going through there, in my opinion.
On my first playthrough, I had a lot of fun in the underworld. In the underworld. in the underground. I had a lot of fun on my first playthrough, and then I think you're right. When I finished the game, it was just all like this. Like, what do I do? There's nothing to do.
Yeah. So I think that the region is prettier in the remakes, but worse from a mechanical standpoint.
That's fair. Okay.
And therefore, I would put it in the same tier as the original Diamond and Pearl, which is C tier. So do we agree on that one?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, and now we're on the finale, which is Pokemon Legends Arceus. The Hisui region, which is... This is kind of a tough one. What do you think about this one? I'm going to let you say your thoughts first.
I think... I'm trying to think of a good like clickbait statement. I think Hisui is so special. I think Hisui at age 28, I think Hisui gave me a feeling that I have not felt since like maybe Hoenn, right? Like I felt like I was actually on an expedition. And that has been missing in all of the 3D Pokemon games. Mm-hmm. And I feel like they've captured it. And while there are limitations technically, there's like technical things that could be improved. Mm-hmm. I think it's an amazing baseline, and it gets me really hyped and remotivated, and I'm ready for the future. I cannot wait for Gen 9. Even if I'm disappointed by Gen 9, I think the games preceding it, or whatever after it, are going to be... I hope they start taking more inspiration from Legends Arceus.
I can already tell Gen 9 is going to be an amazing looking and amazingly designed region from what we've seen. I can already see the good design choices on it. But when we're talking about Hisui, I think that it was made, it feels amplified because you can take your Pokemon out everywhere. You can also take your entire team out everywhere. You can start fights right there on the field. And it's something for Pokemon that I think is very special because of the just nature of a Pokemon game and the Pokemon franchise. To be able to have your Pokemon by your side at all times when traversing an expedition or a region or whatever it is, right? So that goes a long way in making this region feel very special. It also had a good story to it. I like that there's a lot of storied areas. There's a lot of callbacks to the Sinnoh region with the titles of the different areas, and you can kind of see how they form up later, which is really cool. I liked the use of elevation for some of the stuff, such as the Coronet Highlands, I think is the peak of the design for for Hisui. It had a lot of elevation. It had over and unders. So you could go under the mountains, you could go over the mountains, you could also walk the routes around the mountains. And then,
it really is so... That is like revolutionary for the series.
Yes, for the series.
For the series.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about, yeah.
And then traversal options made it even more enjoyable because it's so seamless and you can traverse it in so many fun ways, and just being able to fly over the whole thing makes you really admire it and feel like, yes, this is my region, you know? Mm-hmm.
You said I like the word you used, amplified, because it is small. It's not a massive region.
It's not massive.
I mean, it's not massive. Like in comparison to a lot of other games, I think a lot of people assumed it was going to be as big as Breath of the Wild, but it feels like Breath of the Wild. For me, at least, it feels that way because of what you're saying. You can interact with the region anywhere at any point.
Yeah. I think it would feel better, like a better size, if you could go to each region from each region. Or at least fast travel to them from every part without having to go back to Jubilife Village. But for some reason, that's not a thing. So it does make it feel segmented.
I'm hopeful we'll get it in the next game. I'm hopeful.
Well, we will.
They
they
use the word open world. So
yeah. But with Hisui, I do feel like it was segmented a little too much because the sandboxes aren't big enough, in my opinion.
And it's also not a full game. I mean, it is a full game, but like it does feel like short-lived.
What I would have liked in this region was more of what we saw in the Coronet Highlands, where there is a lot of elevation and secrets that you can find, especially to be able to go back to the other ones. Sure, when you get more traversal options, you can go back to the Obsidian Fieldlands and traverse more areas that you couldn't before, right? But I feel like there wasn't enough of those. And I feel like there also wasn't enough memorable spots as you progress through each segmented sandbox either. So for instance, the Obsidian Fieldlands, there's not many, like there's a lot of big open space and it's pretty flat, even around the lake. And then say the, what was I going to say? Oh, the Icelands.
Yeah.
There's a huge chunk of the Icelands that's just flat. And it's like, why? You could have at least sprinkled some stuff there. I'm at least grateful we have the cave network in the Icelands, which is really cool. There's an over and under that I mentioned that they needed more of. But also, like, the clan villages are, they're just, like, small and just a little too lined up.
There's nothing to do in them also.
Exactly.
So, I think the thing that... So, Legends Arceus is an amazing game. Mm-hmm. I think it might be one of the best Pokemon games. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I think if we're linking Pokemon to the region, there's only, 240 Pokemon? That feels like such a small dex. I'm not sure what the exact number is, but it feels very small. When I think of Black and White, I think of, like, you have all these different routes, and they're all connected. I mean, they're technically open world.
I actually felt like the Pokemon count is actually pretty good, especially for the style of game that it was. I don't feel like it was too small, but what I did take issue with was the recurring Pokemon in each region. Like, there was always Drifloon in every region.
Maybe that's what it is, yeah.
And it's like, maybe why did they do that? Why did they make those Pokemon occur in every spot? Like, there's always Drifloons, there's always Bidoof, there's not a single part, I don't think, that doesn't have Drifloon or Bidoof, if I'm not mistaken. Although maybe the Highlands doesn't have Drifloon.
And that's where I'm like, there are so many, like, I'm gonna push back. I do think it's too small. I don't know, like, if I'm seeing a massive world, I want to continuously encounter new things. There's Mothim everywhere all the time. There's so many Mothim.
Yeah, they could have done better with the disbursements, I agree. And if they did have a higher number of Pokemon, yes, that would obviously help.
But maybe you would need a bigger game also.
Yeah. Well, no.
Right?
I think we could have used more Pokemon, like you said, even in this size of a game. But yes, I would also appreciate a bigger game.
Or maybe you might have said this on a previous podcast, that maybe the Pokemon change during certain things, right? And they change for night to day, but not all of them. And also, I think you were saying, like, maybe if it was raining, more Pokemon should show up. And again, there are some of that already exists, where some Pokemon disappear when it's raining. Mm-hmm. But, like, I feel like there could have been more that they did with that.
Yeah, I think there's I agree. I think there's a few things they could have done more with to make the region feel even more alive and expressive. And what's the word I'm looking for? Where it, like, varies more. Yeah, they could have definitely done more with the region to make it feel more varied throughout when it comes to, like, the Pokemon disbursement. And then again, like I said, the level designs were not as good as they could have been. They could have used more elevation. They could have used more smaller segmented spots that were more memorable. So, like, I don't know if you've played Breath of the Wild, but, like, Breath of the Wild has just, like, little areas that create a giant hole. And with this, it didn't feel like that. It felt like these were just a lot of flat lands that created a giant hole with some stuff scattered throughout. And not nearly dense enough in that regard. So, all in all, I would say that Hisui is a great region. I would put it definitely above neutral just because of how involved it is with your Pokemon and with your journey.
And I would say the style of the game as well. Like, the region feels wholly unique to itself. Like, there's nothing else like this in a Pokemon region.
Yeah, and then they have sure, they're segmented, but the different areas do offer a different flavor. So,
Johnny, like, if Kalos was in this style and you could actually explore all of what, the Pokemon version of France, Kalos would be an excellent region. Same thing with Alola, I think. If you could traverse all of these places fully and it wasn't so linear, I think we would be appreciating these regions a lot more.
Of course, yeah. And that's part of why I think this is I would put it in A tier personally, is because it's there's a lot of ways to appreciate it, even if it's not the best designed region.
Yeah,
there's a lot of ways that they put in for us to appreciate it. So,
totally agree.
Arceus, so we're gonna go in A tier for Arceus?
Yeah, A tier. Let's do it.
Sounds about right. All right, so this is our completed list, with S tier being Hoenn, and the HeartGold SoulSilver version of Johto, and the Black 2 and White 2. Wow, awesome. And then the worst ones being everything in Alola. So
Yeah.
that is the completed list. And
I feel dirty about that.
I feel a little dirty too, but you know, these are our final thoughts, and you know, we have to think of it both from an enjoyment standpoint and from an objective standpoint at the same time to really
Definitely
put these in as we should, you know. So there we go. Those are done. I will give everyone one last look at the tier list, and then yeah, what are your thoughts, everybody, about the game's regions and where you think they would stand on a tier list like this? Feel free to comment your tier list down in the comments, and then in the meantime, Dusty Go-Goat and I are going to keep pushing out some vodcasts for you with some more features on the channel, and we're going to be doing it back and forth on each other's channels, so stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe to me and to Dusty Go-Goat. Dusty, do you want to say goodbye to the crowd?
It's good to see everyone. Please come hang out at the Dusty Go-Goat YouTube channel. We actually just launched another podcast separate from the vodcast. It's called the Pokemaniacs podcast. I don't know if you can find it. It's linked on my channel, but that just launched this week, so I'm really excited about that.
Awesome possum. I'll also have a link to Dusty's channel in the description of this video, so after you subscribe to me, go subscribe to him, and then have fun watching lots of Pokemon content.
There's so much out there.
Yeah, absolutely. But we're going to try to aim for the highest quality out of everyone else. So I hope to see you guys in the next video. And until then, I've been JotoJohnny. He's been Dusty Go-Goat. And we'll catch you all later. Peace.